My name is Nick Funicelli. I have 40 years experience as a scientist. I've worked over 30 years for the federal government as a research biologist, marine biologist, a biological administrator, and a manager of biological folks. I've run labs in St. John Virgin Islands. I've been in charge of the manatee lab here in Gainesville, Florida. And I've also had a faculty position at the University of Florida for the last 30 years. I have a bachelor's in biological sciences, a master's in marine science, and a PhD in fishery science. So I feel qualified to discuss some of these things about climate change.
Excellent.
Don't. We're only a third of it. It's going in the oceans.
Right.
So the biggest impact we should see if it's heating up would be the oceans. And we have now remote sensing, which is big in geography. Remote sensing. We have geographical information systems, GIS. That's how you. That's what your GPS does. You know, we can pinpoint any place now in the world. We can pinpoint where you are. You have no. We can pinpoint when you get in your car. You know. Think about that. Within 100 yards, it can tell you, or 50 yards, where to make a right turn.
Right.
So those satellites are very precise, and they also have surface temperatures of the water.
Right.
And as the world is, whether it's heating up or not heating up, it also can tell and predict because water holds temperature much greater than the land holds temperature. So if I see a piece of water that's hot, it's going to be hot tomorrow. The greatest prediction, by the way, of weather is what it did yesterday, temperature-wise, is probably what it's going to do tomorrow. Think about that. If you want to predict the temperature, of course we have fronts that come through, but if you want to predict temperature, it's probably going to be within plus or minus 3 degrees. You could always be almost right 300 times out of 360, plus or 3 degrees of what it was yesterday, because it doesn't change that quickly. But it doesn't change even less quickly, if that's the correct words, in the ocean, because what we call, and I don't want to get too technical, the specific heat of oceans holds heat and cold much longer than land does. So with that in mind, when we see a hot spot, when we see a place where the ocean is heating up, we can then go to that precise place and see if we see any differences in the ocean fauna and flora, the animals and the plants in that ocean. And what I would say to you that fascinates me is we've known for 40 years that we sometimes see coral reef bleaching.
Right.
And now we've learned that if where we see these hot spots are in areas that are corals, within 2 to 3 days of that event, corals will bleach. So there is a direct relationship that I can see. I don't know why, except I now have a 99.999% chance when the ocean heats, these are facts, corals bleach. Now, as a scientist, I begin to find out what is coral bleaching.
Right.
It's occurring when I see a coral go from brown to white. And that's where we begin to do the science. And we can pursue that for a second, or we can continue on. The point I'm making is in these hot spots, we know temperature is increasing.
Right.
And with that increasing temperature, we can see some results of what happens to the fauna and flora. And that's why my comments in conclusion to people are, I don't want to argue with you whether we have climate change or not. I assure you, the facts tell me the temperature is going up. I assure you we have climate change. You want to argue with me whether it's the gas, whether there's pollution coming out of the tailpipe, or whether it's got nothing to do with man and it's the orbit of the planet. I don't give a flip. The point I'm making is it's going up. We can argue as to the why it's going up, but it's categorically true. It's going up.
So the facts are obviously there through research and going into like sea levels with the polar ice caps shrinking and sea levels rising in certain areas. Like, have you had the opportunity to study some of that and how that affects the sea waters?
Okay. By definition, rising sea waters is an impact to land. And
Mm-hmm.
other than the coastal lands, I typically don't study that. But I will tell you a story that again, we're all scientists, whether you think of it or not, in various ways. We observe things through our life and we come to conclusions which may or may not be correct. So why does water sea level rise to begin with? Think
Mm-hmm.
about that. You said the polar ice caps. That's true. We've got more water. And if we assume the water's getting hotter, we've got a double whammy there. We've got
Mm-hmm.
more water, and hotter water takes more space. So
Okay.
two things occurring. We've got more water entering the system because what used to be ice is now water. So we've got more water, and we also have warmer water.
Mm-hmm.
So our levels rise. Uh, Something that in 1970 was the first time I went to Key West.
Okay.
And then through the years, I've gone to Key West comparatively frequently. And since I've lived in Florida, for a while I was going to Key West. I'd have a meeting down there once a month for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I went there. There was a special project I was on. And in those 30 to 40 years, from 1970 is what? Well, that's 20, and that's 50 years. 50 years.
Thank
Wow.
you for bringing up my birthday. Yeah.
For 50 years, I've been seeing Key West, and about 5 years ago, I was in Key West, and all of a sudden, I was walking in places I always walk, and I am not kidding you. I was up to my ankles in water.
Mm.
And I said, "This is impossible." I said, "I've been here so many times, this has never occurred." So I said, "This must be extremely high tide." So I went to the tide charts, and I said, "No, it wasn't high tide."
Huh.
And the point I'm making is, even when you look at various places on the earth, you look at from the edge, or you look at bulkheaded areas where we're on a platform or whatever, we could look down at any water and it's literally 6 inches away from us, 4 inches away.
Mm.
Look at that. You know, if I know you're personally from New York City. When you walk down Lower Manhattan, that water's right there. I mean, you're
Right.
walking right next to the East River and the Hudson River. What I realized, what I looked at then was Key West is one of those areas where we're looking at a centimeter, which is a lot, literally
Right.
per year or so, it rising per year.
Hmm.
So we were beginning to see real water rising in a place I had always been. Now, I didn't know if that was it or not. And needless to say, on higher tides, but this is the storm sewers. Think about this island nation, or this island
Right.
where water is storm water. They don't treat it. The water that hits the streets and whatnot, not polluted, not wastewater. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
storm water, falls to
Right.
the, hits the ground. They just have pipes that go back out into the ocean.
Right.
Well, when that ocean gets high enough, those pipes will bring the water back up. And that's what
Right.
was happening. We were seeing seawater come into the streets. So and now in the last 5 years, and I don't select my days by tide level when I visit the Keys.
Right.
For the last 5 years, I've been down there, and probably on a half a dozen occasions at least, I see water in the streets around Mallory Square in Key West. So
Interesting.
I'm observing water coming, places underwater, and we've already documented in the South Pacific nations, literal islands that have had to be evacuated, that the water
Right.
coming up too high or whatever. And that's not to be confused, by the way. There's a third thing coming: more water, hotter water. This is a different environmental impact and global change, but we also pump a lot of water for you to drink,
Yes.
for people to do, and eventually that water, think about it, as we take water from the bottom, the earth begins to get lower. It's called subsidence. It's happening in Venice.
Yes.
Venice has triple things. It has subsidence, it has oceans getting hotter, and it has the ice melting. So it's got, in addition to the rising water, Venice is sinking.
Right.
So
Which,
they don't advertise this, but over 100 days a year to 200 days a year, in that range, St. Mark's Square in Venice is underwater.
oh my gosh.
when last time when I was in Venice, they have, for lack of a better word, tabletops that they put out at least 150 days a year for tourists to walk over this flooded